board members to stand. I know we've got our past president, Mary Maloney, over here, operating the camera, so behave. Who else do we have from New England HIMSS? Pat Rio. If you are interested in sponsoring, Pat Rio would be the person to talk to, so we will thank our sponsors later. We also have Rich Kubica, past president of New England HIMSS as well. And we have Pam, and she is our advocacy chair. So, thank you all. We're going to begin with, before we begin, I did want to thank all the sponsors for being here. Without you, we cannot host events like this. And I know it's raining. I don't know if you were here a couple years ago when we had the fire drills going on. So let's hope that doesn't happen today, because that was a beautiful day 2 years ago. And today, we're not going to have the same experience if we do networking out in the parking lot. So. But with that said, let's network a little and meet some other people you haven't met. We tend to, stay at the tables that people we know and are familiar. Meet some other folks while you're here. You never know, you might have some cross synergy going on. So thank you to PC Connection, Oxford, Wolf, Mindleaf, Sacred Heart, Queen Associates, Charter Oak, and we also have Elsevier, Orion, and HSM. Intrasystems, IATRIC, and Leidos Health for being here today. We really appreciate it. So I'm going to have Mary Beth Eldredge from Dartmouth-Hitchcock kick this off and introduce our speakers. She will be introduced later. We'll give a little bit of a bio on her. Maybe she can tell us about organic farming in New Hampshire or how to survive Dartmouth-Hitchcock for over 20 years. So anyway, with that said, I'll let Mary Beth speak.
Thank you. Welcome to scenic Lebanon, New Hampshire, on behalf of Dartmouth-Hitchcock and HIMSS. As Melissa said, I'm Mary Beth Eldredge. I'm the Director of Regional IT at Dartmouth-Hitchcock. And I'm also the Board Chair of the New Hampshire Health Exchange, so I wear a couple of different hats. I'm here to introduce our first morning speakers from VITL and from the New Hampshire HIO. Dartmouth's pleased to be a participant in both health exchanges. I like to say I play cricket in one state and baseball in another. And both these gentlemen will be speaking to the differences and the similarities that they have. So Mike Gagnon is the CTO at VITL. Jeff Laughlin is the Executive Director at Miot. I'm not going to read their bios, I think you all can read. They both bring a lot of experience and knowledge about healthcare, about technology, and about health exchange to their positions. But I was trying to find some little tidbits that people don't write in the bio that I could share with you. And so Mike, I hear that you have this secret passion to maybe be a seafood chef somewhere. And if you weren't the CTO, that you might want to open a seafood restaurant. And I just learned from Jeff that he was just promoted to be a full colonel in the Massachusetts National Guard. But that's not really what I wanted to say. So I wanted to say that. But I also wanted to say that he's a new fan of that local elixir, Teddy Topper. and so much so that I think he just hired somebody from Vermont for the express purpose of acquiring said Teddy Topper and bringing it to him. So we'll have to keep our eye on that. Jeff and Mike have a lot in common. They both like red wine. I can validate that. They both hail from Massachusetts, although up here in New Hampshire and Vermont, we won't hold that against them. But I think the best commonality they have is their passion and enthusiasm for improving interoperability, both in Vermont and in New Hampshire and within the region. And I think you'll see some of that passion and enthusiasm today in their brief presentations and then in our panel discussion, where there will be no shortage of good conversation. So without further ado, Mike Gagnon will speak first from VITL, and then Jeff.
See if I can put this thing on. I like to walk around while I talk. How's that? Can you hear me? All good? If not, I'll just talk louder. How's that? Let's get the presentation up. right, so we're going to talk about interoperability here today, a topic that's near and dear to my heart and really, really difficult to do. I like to say, I'll tell you later, but I like to say I love data and I hate data. I love data and I hate data. That'll be a theme as we go along here. It's taking its time, okay? So the topic today is more than just building our HIE. We've been building HIE in Vermont for about 10 years now, since 2005, and a lot of the work has been in just collecting data into we use Medicity as our vendor, into our Medicity platform and making that data available to providers who are caring for patients. But it has become more than that in the last 2 years, and that is, as we've seen patient-centered medical homes and accountable care organization, other health reform initiatives, the data you get for clinical purposes just isn't enough to serve the needs of those who want to perform analytics and other kind of data. And so one of the things I'm going to talk about today is the promise and the pitfalls of building a clinical data warehouse, which goes well beyond just building the data into your clinical network, but then what else do you have to do to that data to make it ready for that kind of the thing that we really want to do with all this clinical data, along with treating patients, is to start to be able to know what's going on in the population of patients. So,
we're having a little technical challenge here.
is it extending? It's not extending as a presentation. Technical difficulties.
Probably around the laptop.
You know who set this up? I'm sorry.
Let's have a fire drill.
Let's have a fire. Temporarily have a fire drill. I'm trying to drag it to the other screen. Is that that's what's going on?
Oh, there we go.
There we go.
There it is.
Great.
Okay.
Yay! Gee, CTO can't get the thing to work. Sad, huh? All right, let's see. We also have no mouse. How about that? Aha, okay. So like I said, VITL's been around for 10 years. We've been collecting data for almost all of that time. We started out with mostly just pushing messages around. We weren't even collecting data into the network. We were delivering lab results. We were pushing ADTs. We were helping our partner organization, the Vermont Blueprint for Health, which is a patient-centered medical home, kind of a chronic care registry system. That was the interesting in our state is that initiative, that patient-centered medical home initiative, and VITL grew up at kind of the same time. And so that put us in an interesting spot. One, in that most HIEs initially focus on hospital data, pull that in and start to build up, a big data set. Whereas we focused initially on this patient-centered medical home primary care doc registry. So the bad news is we didn't collect much data for a long time because we weren't working with the hospitals. But the good news is we became really, really good at care summaries and chronic, CCDs and CCDAs. And so for a while we were a little far behind, and now we're starting to realize we're kind of rocketing ahead because of our knowledge in that space and what we can do with those CCDs. So we get 4 million clinical messages a month. Not the biggest network, but pretty big for a state of 600,000 or so. That data is patient demographics, events, labs, transcribed reports, medications, immunizations, care summaries, pretty much across the board in terms of the kind of data we get in. Every hospital in Vermont is in, plus Dartmouth in New Hampshire, plus one in New York, are all in, and I'm guessing about 75 or 80% of the primary care docs are in now. And we're working on specialists, and we're starting to talk about nursing homes and chiropractors, and we're starting to expand our scope to anyone who cares for a patient. If you're going to run an ACO in the state, you kind of have to know all the touch points, right? So that's what's going on there. And so what do we use this data for? It's to identify those patients. So interesting, I said 600,000 residents, 1.7 million patients in the MPI. And that's because of people who influx or move in a state and move out of state, who come to vacation, who you know, for any number of reasons. There's a lot of New York folks in our network because a lot of care is delivered at UVM Medical Center from folks in New York. We get folks from New Hampshire because Dartmouth's on our network. So the MPI actually is more of a geographic spread of where the medical service area is than the actual state boundaries. The state boundaries are not what hold people back at all. It's really getting care in their region is what happens with patients. So we provide clinical data at the point of care through our product called VITL Access. It's a provider portal. The day we rolled it out, I'd like to say as CTO, it's about to become obsolete because a portal is not the ideal way for a doc to log into another thing to get this data. The ideal way is if in your EHR, it knew how to query our network and it just appeared, not downloaded, but appeared in some kind of window, right? We use those IHE profiles and we could view that data. To me, that's the way we should be going. And so, we're rolling this thing out and I'm already planning for its obsolescence. Our Vice President of Patient Care, Judith Friends, will not be happy to tell you that because she just started rolling the thing out. So she knows where I'm going with that. We process transactions, and we've been doing this for quite some time. So we take in transactions like lab results, orders, and stuff, and deliver them to someone else. So we delivered lab results into systems, and we've been doing that for a long time. In the last couple of years, probably 3 now almost, at least 2, we've been starting to deliver immunizations to our Vermont Department of Health. And that's going quite well. We actually now took on doing all their validations for them inside our network. So we used to just send them to them, they reject them, they wouldn't, you'd have to go back to the client. Now we're starting to do the validations in the middle of the network because we've got more capabilities for doing that. So we're building our base of the things that the network does. We're very soon going to start sending notifications to providers. So you're a patient was seen in the emergency department, you're a patient was seen in the an inpatient, your patient was discharged from a hospital. And so that's coming real soon. We've been not in presentation mode. Got tired out. Just come back in a second. So I'll just keep talking while we're figuring this out. We also started to support our accountable care organizations. We have 3 in our state, one big one Care Vermont, Dartmouth, and UVM Medical Center joined together to form that one. It includes all the hospitals and many of the providers in the state. And then we have 2 other smaller ones, one formed by the federally qualified health centers and one that's a private set of docs who have 10 practices across the state. What we started to do is we built something called a payer gateway or an ACO gateway. And what that simply is we take in a beneficiary file, we match it up against our master patient index so we know beneficiary ID match to all their clinical ID matches, and then we can build a filter to send the data to them using that. So sounds easy, but actually what is really kind of cool about it is it's one of the first time we've actually had both insurance identifiers and medical record numbers, clinical identifiers, all in the same master patient index. So to me, it's kind of the beginning of where we're going with some of the stuff we'll talk about here in a second is claims clinical integration. I'm going to step through some of these slides fairly quickly.
Quicker than you thought, huh?
Maybe not that fast. A little tricky. Maybe we'll just plug in my servers and we'll do it there and that. So we knew that collecting all this data, we were going to probably soon be able to create a clinical data warehouse. Now, I've been in technology for a long time. It's a logical step that when you have all this data sitting there you're using for operational purposes or clinical purposes, it's logical to think that you can then start to use that for analytics and population health and other services. And so 18 months ago, we started down this path and bought an interface engine, SQL Enterprise, and we began the journey towards building this warehouse. Just more recently, we bought a reporting tool called Tableau, a business intelligence tool, Tableau, and now we're starting to produce some interesting data off of that and finding how messy that data really is. And that's kind of the interoperability theme here today, is that even when you've got the interfaces built, a lot of times a human being can look at that stuff and make sense of it, but it is messy for doing anything else with it. And so there's a lot of work in doing that part of it. So we kind of are going through these 3 phases of building this infrastructure. So this was our goal. The 4 phases of doing this is to collect all the data from the VHIE, meaning that the data we've been collecting into our clinical network, we have to now push into a warehouse environment. Sometimes we call that ETL, extraction, translation, and loading, but in our case, it's just a set of interfaces. Is the power actually on? That's interesting. So I'll keep talking to the slides and you won't be able to see them. So we realized we were going to start to not only build this warehouse, but we're going to be able to create little subsets of that data for use by our ACOs and others. Something I call, they're called in the industry data marts. And we're going to be able to start to do reporting and analytics off of these things. So what we really realized that the needs for clinical data are changing. What we used in just a care setting is beyond that. We're now starting to realize we need to have this data available for doing population health and other needs. And interestingly, we're an all-payer claims database state. What that means, but all the payers submit their claims to a single source. But that source is de-identified data. So our claims are de-identified, but our clinical data is identified. So we've kind of got to rub there. We've got to kind of work through how are you going to get those 2 data sets together and make them effectively both identified but protected in such a way that people are comfortable with that. So one of the things we quickly realized is we're going to need to improve the data quality of the data we're getting. It just isn't going to work well. Our partners, as I said, we grew up at the same time. The Vermont Blueprint for Health and VITL grew up at the same time. Well, guess what? The Blueprint wanted clean data for analysis in population health. And most of the data we sent them was fair to poor for that use. And so they complained a lot, rightfully so, but we both quickly realized that what's happening is this is a kind of data ecosystem. That's what's happening at the practice level and in the network and at the endpoint analytics all matter. And you've got to attack this as a 3-way approach. You've got to get the practice to enter data, and their vendor has to interface that data in such a way that it's useful at the next step. And then the network can provide services. It can describe what's missing. It can do terminology services and mapping. There's things that can be done in the middle of this network and make that data better. And then at the end point, when you finally do the analytics, you get the final view of saying, does this make sense? When I do this analysis, do my length of stay on this side look like what I've really been experiencing, in the hospital? Do they make sense to me? And so, we kind of had to think about that as a whole data ecosystem. I'll show you a diagram of the things we've done here in a minute. Not all the data is coded to national standards. Like I said, we're going to have a terminology services engine soon in our network so that we can map terms to standards like LOINC and RxNorm and SNOMED and such. And my long-term goal, and many of our long-term goals, the goal of our Green Mountain Care Board, which oversees the health reform in our state, is to get claims and clinical data in one set of data that they can look. So when they pull a policy lever on one side, they can see what the clinical outcome is. When they try to make quality improvements or care improvements on one side, they can see what the cost implications are. And so that's kind of where we're heading in terms of long-term needs. So I like to say, I love data. And I hate data. It's so hard to do things. That's me. In my office going, really, what are we doing with this? So this is love. Okay? Wow, this is cool, isn't it? The bright shiny object, look at that. 90-day utilization, oh, so cool. Hate data. This is what we get. HL7 messages, half the time they're no good. What's in this field? Nothing. It's supposed to be. Loathe entirely. CC CCDs, oh wow, talk about a standard that's not standard. Now, luckily, our team has taken these things. This is like yeoman's work for our team. We've parsed every single CCD from every vendor down to its individual data element level. It's incredible, the work that our team did there. So, thank you. So this has been like incredible work over the first 6 months of this year, and has prepped us for creating this amazing thing we'll probably have in about 6 months to a year. There's a lot of more work to do where we'll have this clinical data warehouse ready to go. This work has been over the top in terms of what you have to do, because you have to take it vendor by vendor and look at them and then effectively back into everything. You have to re-engineer from the field to field level out of it, every single one. So there's this goal of remediating data. So I pound into my team, we want data to be complete, accurate, and consistent. So we want it to know missing fields, what's in the fields is right, and that they do the same thing over time. And so to do this, I'm going to jump ahead a little quickly, the steps to data quality. We have to capture this data. So there's work that has to be done on the front end of the system, as I said. The interface must be developed to the HIE, so you have to have it, and it has to be from a reputable vendor, and you have to do the right, you have to take the data and put it in the right places. The data must be included in the interface. You'd think that that would be like an easy thing, right? No. Sometimes you enter data into fields, or you create a special template for your workflow and your practice, and you go, great, this is awesome, I've got this great workflow. And that breaks the interface. There's no data in that same field because you have a customized workflow. Data must be in the right fields. Okay, vendor by vendor, it is or is not. The inbound interface must be formatted correctly. Okay, that one's becoming a little, at least let's say, we know how to deal with all the complexity that's out there. So that's some years of practice. Data must be coded correctly. The outbound interface must be formatted for the receiving system. So we started shipping data to things like the blueprint and the ACOs. We've got to deal with the back end of it. And it must be complete, accurate, and consistent. So I said we're going to start to do data translations. We're going to collect data from source systems using custom formats. Basically, if I need specialized data to do a clinical program or a quality initiative, I'll take data in whatever format I have to get it. And it's unfortunate, but we will do it. If we have to, we have taken the approach that we're going to take whatever you can give us. And as long as it serves some use, it's practical, it's useful, we're going to take it. And then I'm going to show you at the beginning is what we call our dashboard. So this is an early prototype of what we're going to have as a dashboard. And the idea is to create a feedback loop to the practices of the organization sending data and tell them how well they're doing. Score them on their data quality. Tell them how often do you send us, blood pressure? How often do you send us oxygen saturation? How often do you send us, height and weight and other fields? And so to create this feedback loop where we have a dashboard, where we don't know how the presentation is going to look like. This is one of our early samples of how we're going to do this. But the idea is to create this constant feedback loop from us to those organizations to say, here's how you're doing, and here's what that means in terms of your participation in an ACO or your patient-centered medical home, and you're missing these 3 key quality elements, and that, that impacts the way care is delivered. So we think that's a really important early step. So before we're able to do any kind of interesting analytics, if we don't fix this, the data we'll be doing the analytics on will be garbage. And so, what good is that? So just how much I got time I got left? Maybe 5 minutes, 3 minutes. This is what we built. And so really complex diagram, but let me orient you through it. So this is our Vermont, the VHIE, what we call the Vermont Health Information Exchange. So here's our organization sending us their data, happily coming along, both the love, the hate, and the loathe entirely. Put that into our master patient index. Master patient index is about 89, almost 90% accuracy in this data in terms of matching, so pretty good. Not perfect, but pretty good. We have Vital Direct, Vital Notify, the notification services I mentioned to you that are about to go live. Vital Access is our provider portal, which is what they use for the clinical uses. And then there's actually a dot that's wrong on there. we started collecting all the data out of that infrastructure run by Medicity into our own environment. So we bought the Rhapsody integration engine and SQL Enterprise and Tableau tool and put that together, and we've got every clinical message now flows to us. Since March, we've been getting every single clinical message that flows into this network flows to our infrastructure as well. And then just at the end of last month, we got all the historical data on a giant disk, 2.5 terabytes of data since the beginning of us starting this network, and we're starting to load that in. So pretty soon we will have this fully built out clinical data warehouse that we can then ship data to, you know, the OneCare Vermont Health Catalyst network and others, and we work with the Blueprint for Health and give them their data sets. And so this has been an interesting challenge, and I think my team thought it was a little wacky a couple of years ago when I said, yeah, we're going to build this thing, and here's what it's going to look like. And we went down several paths that failed and backed away from. We were going to use one vendor, it didn't work. We were going to use the second one. We finally decided that building the tools was the way to go. Not trying to find a vendor to do the solution. No one quite hit the sweet spot of what we needed. And so we're a little out ahead of the curve. We're probably the only Medicity network doing something like this just yet. And so because of that, we're kind of growing our own, and it's going well. Like I said, the big work here was all that CCD parsing stuff, and that was a really interesting and difficult work, so that you get everything down to individual data fields. So, that's kind of where we're at as of today, and look forward to having part of your questions in terms of the panel discussion.